So we are going to go ahead and record today's meeting so that staff members who were not able to participate will be able to watch the recording. Similar to the other staff Zooms that we did, I am not going to be putting these out on our websites. They will be on our YouTube, but they'll be like kind of an, I think it's called an unlisted link, so that you have to have the link to be able to watch, to view the video. And so we will make that available hopefully later today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. Just one second. And okay. So just wanted to go over a couple of things, how the call will work. But first, share an important link with you. It's been included in a number of our communications, cusd200.org/reopening plans. That website, that link has got all of the documents and FAQs and videos from our parent Zooms on that section of the website. And so that's a really good resource for you to have. Certainly one of the things that collectively we are working on is building out a single staff resource where you have access to various protocols and practices and different things like that. One other thing that I'll mention too is that a number of the people who are your hosts today on this call are members of our core reopening team. And so that team, core reopening team, who's now meeting 2 times a week, includes our assistant superintendents, but also representatives from our teaching staff, our support staff, the WWEA, the CEA, our nursing chair, Sue Vasco. I think principals at each level, both middle, high school, and elementary. And so all of those individuals have been not only been a part of that core reopening team, but also serve as leaders, and some people on this call too serve as leaders of sub-teams that are working to support that reopening team and building out lots of details for all of those plans. So I want to start this meeting from the onset by offering a huge thanks to anybody who has been a member of those sub-teams, who's been working very, very hard this summer to get ready for school in the fall. And I will say that really that reopening team, we have really approached reopening schools that if guidance allowed and there was a path that based on the guidance we could bring students into our schools, we were going to create a plan for that. And certainly that adheres to all of the guidelines, but that also offers families an opportunity to make an alternative choice, virtual academy. But in any case, that whatever plan we set forth, that the health and safety of all of our staff and students is prioritized. And so just the way the meeting will work, this meeting is will be 1 hour long and will be recorded for, I'm sorry, not families, this is the same document I used for the other Zoom calls, will be recorded for staff members who are not able to participate today. Due to the size of the group, all participants will remain muted other than the hosts. If you have a question, please put it in the chat bar and include the name of your school. So for example, my children attend Wiesbrook, so I would put Erica Wiesbrook. Now but please put what building that you work in. Messages can only be sent to hosts, but please make sure you send them to me so that your question will be asked. We will answer questions in the order received, and if we feel that a question's already been answered, we will move on to the next question. We want to keep today's our questions focused around special questions related to special education, special services, related services. And then if time allows, we can answer those other questions that you may have that you've placed in the chat bar. And I do know Erica Ekstrom also sent me a couple of emails with some questions from staff ahead of time. So I'll probably toggle between the chat bar and those other questions that were sent in. If time did not allow to answer your question, this recording also allows us to gather a transcript of the questions in the chat bar. So we will make sure that Cameron and B get both of those transcripts, so that if they need to follow up with you or get an answer to a question you may have asked, that that we'll do that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. The hosts that are on this call, did I miss anything by way of just introduction? Seeing shaking no heads. All right, let me jump over to the chat bar. Again, we're going to focus, at least to start, questions related to special education. What is the procedure for those of us that travel between multiple buildings in regards to minimizing cross-contamination?
So we are currently working with various aspects of other district reopening teams, both our health services team and our human resources team, to have plans for our staff who travel between buildings. So once that guidance is finalized, we will have information to share for our staff who do travel.
Thank you. Okay. How would a student in an instructional classroom, in this case particular K2, be grouped if they chose the virtual academy? If they don't have the skills of their grade level peers?
So currently,
and one final, would they have a special education teacher as a virtual academy teacher?
Yes. So students who are in special education will receive a special education teacher as part of Virtual Academy. In terms of student grouping, we are awaiting final enrollment numbers, and then we will start working on class assignments, staffing, and looking at all aspects of class assignments, related services. But that first step to that process is finalization of enrollment.
One second. Okay. Will reevals from last spring that ended up being record reviews need to be reopened this fall?
I'm going to divert this question over to B, and I will add on to that. But B has been working very closely and working on our related services team that has been handling evaluation guidance.
So the answer is yes. We're going to be completing all the evaluations, but we're going to have guidance about how to do that safely.
Move on to the next. Okay. If an IEP student will be staying home for e-learning, which I'm going to change that to if an IEP student will be in the virtual academy, will they be able to come to school for related services like social work, OT, SPED, speech?
Students who are attending our virtual academy will be receiving their related services via virtual academy format as well. So related services in virtual academy will be provided virtually via both synchronous and asynchronous service delivery.
And I should have given a disclaimer at the very beginning of this call that while I have been in the district for almost 10 years now, I do not have an education background, and I absolutely am not super familiar with the world of special education. So if I misspeak or don't use the correct terminology on something, my apologies from the very start. That this is very much out of my comfort zone. So I just wanted to say I should give that disclaimer from the onset. Many of us in special ed may be unable to maintain physical distancing while doing our job. Can you clarify what PPE will be provided for us so I can determine if I need to provide anything for myself?
Yes, so we recognize that additional PPE is going to be needed for all staff, but especially staff in special education, and how additional PPE may look differently based upon the roles and the services that you provide. So each one of our reopening teams has been broken down by program. So we had reopening teams for resource services K-5, resource services 612, our cross-categorical programs, which may sometimes be referred to as primary, intermediate supportive academic programming, our social emotional programming, which may be referred to as supportive and directive or skills level programming, as well as our instructional programs, which are sometimes referred to as Syracuse or CSI, and it's now referred to as essential or SAIL. And so those are the broad gamut of levels of programming that we have. And so staff may come in contact with students for a variety of reasons that are closer than 6 feet. And I didn't even touch on related services that is going to come in contact with students closer than 6 feet. So depending on the reasons why staff may come in contact, there will be guidance documents that talk about best practices for additional PPE that staff may need and under what circumstances. So if you're coming in contact with students for a social emotional reason or to support behavior, we're going to have a different set of best practice guidance and what PPE you need for behavioral versus if you need to support students for academics. Versus if you're supporting students for functional life skills, we're going to have a different set of PPE. Universally, we recognize that special education staff may need what are called clear communicator masks because many of our special education staff, both teaching staff, related services, and paraprofessionals often support along broad sweeping demands. So special education staff will be provided with masks that have that clear strip in front of a student's face so that students can see your lips. We also recognize that staff in very specialized programs may need additional PPE like face shields, gloves, gowns, plexiglass sheets. If you have any questions as to what types of additional PPE your programs need, please do not hesitate to reach out to your director. And if you work in related services, please don't hesitate to reach out to John DeSanza, who can talk about the additional PPE that related services staff may need.
Erica, a couple of questions while we're on, you touched on face masks. Talk about, this came up last night on our special ed parent Zoom. Talk about the face mask requirement and what are the steps that families and or staff would need to take if they were making a request for an accommodation or an exception.
Absolutely, that is a great question, and that's probably one of the most common questions that we are receiving in our office. So first of all, I'm going to talk about from the broadest scope. We will have a board policy that all students, all staff, all visitors to our building are required to wear a face mask. And so that it will be in board policy, it will be in our student handbooks. Dr. Schuler in every parent Zoom has reiterated that to our staff and our community. In the rare, and I really stress rare exception that a student needs a face mask accommodation or exemption, there are steps that will need to be taken, and our reopening committee has worked with our health services team, ISB guidance, the DuPage County Health Department, and legal to outline very specific guidance that will need to be followed. Principals receive this information at our principal meetings that have been occurring this summer, and staff, psychologists, our department chairs, our student support specialists will receive it in our Return to School Summer Academy on August 5th and 6th. Legal will also be present, but you guys all get a preview of these steps today. And so those steps are, parents will need to submit this information in writing with detail and any supplemental documentation such as a doctor's note. A team will need to come together to review this information. If you look at what the ISB guidance talks about there are very specific times in which a face mask accommodation or modification is warranted. Things such as medical contraindication, a student is not able to independently remove a a mask. With all that being said, we recognize that students are going to need supports. So this document lays out several supports and services that teams can use to help a student and help staff support students in meeting those face mask requirements, such as visual strategies, verbal strategies, positive reinforcement strategies, environmental strategies. All of those you will often see in the language that talks about students might need sensory supports, and that could be a reason they can't wear a mask. Legal was very clear that this should be a process that we use of moving from least restrictive to most restrictive. So all of those supports should be tried prior. In the rare case that a student is not able to wear a mask, we are obligated to make sure that we are providing staff with increased PPE and social distancing measures. That increased PPE and social distancing measures may be appropriate at other times. So you'll often see in our guidance documents, we reference that section for other guidance. So we've outlined best practices for additional PPE and social distancing, such as times in which staff should wear face shields, when they should wear goggles, when they should wear gowns, when they should have gloves, when they should have increased distance greater than 6 feet. And so these are all additional PPE that we have worked with Dr. Kyle, and we are in the process of ordering for staff for the start of school.
Erica, you referenced ordering certain supplies. What supplies have been ordered, will be ordered, but all readily available once the school year begins? What specific supplies?
We have ordered clear communicator masks, face shields, gloves, disposable gowns. Disposable gowns will be available to staff who will come in contact intermittently with students, as well as staff who will come in contact intermittently with bodily fluids. Staff who are in contact with students on a consistent and daily basis with students who have in bodily fluids, we are exploring the purchasing of scrubs for staff. We are also in the process of ordering plexiglass shields for central localization in all of our buildings for use by special education staff.
Thank you. Mary, talk a little bit about how staff training, but how we will work with students who either refuse to wear the mask, not because they don't believe in it, but just they refuse to wear it, they keep taking it off. Students who don't understand the concept of physical distancing and are not maintaining physical distancing. Can you talk to me a little bit about how that shakes out?
Yeah, sure. I can jump on with that question. That came up last night too, just for those who were not able to join the panel last night. But first, it's really nice to see a lot of familiar faces on here. Thanks for joining the call. And, I really do believe that our teachers do this type of work every year in some capacity, right? This year, we're going to be teaching students how to follow different walking patterns in our classroom and how to wear a mask. And in other years, we've done very similar things to help keep our friends safe from each other, just with a different twist to it, right? So we did assure families that last night that our teachers come, our staff come with a lot of tricks up their sleeves, but we're going to be doing the basics of what we've always been doing when we've tried to get a student to be able to participate with other kids in a classroom, right? So we're going to use visuals, we're going to use first then boards, we're going to use positive reinforcement, a lot of those things that Erica talked about earlier today. Certainly, we did mention last night too that the interventions will differ depending on the student's ability, developmental levels, age, right? Things like that, things you do in an early childhood classroom, you're probably not going to be bringing up to the high school level. So we understand that we have to take a very age appropriate approach to things, but we did say, there's a good chance in classrooms you'll be seeing some visual markers on the ground, right? You'll be taping off sections to really show students. And of course, best practice would be to start off the school year teaching your expectations and reviewing what rules are going to go on. And right, this year we're probably going to have a few more rules to go over, to teach, direct teach, and to review constantly. So that was our message last night, and I think I share the same thing to you guys today.
Thank you. Sometimes conversations with parents whose students have IEPs can be challenging. What will you do to support us when they are demanding certain accommodations? Like, I don't want my child to wear a mask. I want my kid at school every day, certain things kind of like that, exceptions. How will staff be supported?
We're first laying that groundwork now. So we have really set the vision right away with our board policy, as well as communicating during all of our Zoom meetings what that universal expectation is that our students, staff, and visitors will be wearing Zoom meeting or will be wearing face masks. We are also working on those guidance documents and having scripts that teams can use. Personally, I fielded many of these phone calls in the same way in which I'm answering this on calls now. I'm letting families know that the expectation will be that our students are wearing masks to school, and that it will be very rare exceptions in which a student receives a face mask exemption. And the same goes for the request for multiple days of instruction. We are developing guidance processes and procedures for if a family is asking for those 4 days of instruction, if they're outside of those specialized programs that we have referenced in earlier conversations, as well as scripts on how to respond, as well as having district ready to issue letters that staff can send. As always, though, we know that these best laid plans can need some additional administrative support, and our team is always available to assist, to join in those meetings and helping to join those team meetings and having those conversations alongside you.
Thank you. For Syracuse students that choose the virtual academy, will they still be on my caseload, and will I be responsible for providing those e-learning activities?
Currently, we are looking at the registration for all of our students who are indicating that they are choosing the virtual academy option. Students who are choosing virtual academy will be assigned a special education teacher in virtual academy. After that includes our instructional students, including Syracuse. Once all the enrollment is done, we are going to need to work with our human resources department to see how the enrollment is looking, and then we will need to work collaboratively with human resources to see how class lists look.
But Erica, just to clarify, if a teacher is a virtual academy teacher, they will not also have students in person. So if you are a virtual academy teacher, you are a virtual academy teacher only. If you are an in-person, even if it's hybrid, middle high, if you are an in-person teacher, you are an in-person teacher only, or staff, I should say.
That is correct.
Will the homeschool team responsible for conducting reevaluations for students? Is the homeschool team responsible for conducting reevaluations for students in the virtual academy?
I'm going to send this one to B again, who is our expert on evaluations.
Unlikely, because whenever possible, the virtual person will, whoever that person is, will try to use virtual means to complete the evaluation. But if a face-to-face evaluation is needed and the person who's doing the virtual academy is doing it for medical reasons where they can't be in the building in person, there might be another person on site that can complete that evaluation. So those requests will be funneled through the department chair, who will then look at caseloads and assign the evaluation to whoever has room on their caseload.
With the new schedules, how will buildings with Wednesday IEP meetings be held? Will all IEP meetings be virtual?
IEP meetings are priority method and preferred method for holding IEP meetings will be virtually. If you recall in the spring, if a parent did not want to hold the meeting virtually, The way we were receiving guidance from the state at that time was all meetings needed to be deferred to the fall when face-to-face meetings could resume. That mandate from the state of diverting meetings to the fall lifted once we moved from phase 3 to phase 4 at the end of June. So current reopening guidance indicates that meetings to the greatest extent possible should continue to be held virtually. So that is the first option we will give to all families. In the event that a family says that they do not want their IEP meeting face-to-face or virtually, we will offer a face-to-face meeting. However, that does not mean that the entire IEP team comes together face-to-face, because we are still obligated to meet social distancing. So the LEA representative and the parent or a member of the team, such as the director or the building principal, we have IEP guidance that will lay this out, may be meeting with the parent under social distancing guidelines, along with all of our other district safety parameters, such as the parents must wear a mask, he must be socially distant. We will be having a face-to-face meeting, and other IEP team members may remote into the meeting from another location in the building. We have scripts that teams would use to offer this on how to offer the meetings to parents. And all of that has been laid out in IEP meeting guidance procedures that will be available for staff to help walk them through the processes at the start of the year.
Go ahead, Cameron.
Erica, can I have you clarify about, I think part of that question was about Wednesday IEP meetings, since Wednesdays are going to be remote learning days and days for our PD and our PLC time, and it's half days from the morning. Can you clarify more about Wednesday IEP meetings, please?
We, in terms of when meetings are scheduled, we defer to the buildings as to when they're scheduling their meetings. So I would direct staff back to their building administrators and their department chairs to determine when their scheduled IEP meetings are going to be.
Their concern about the heavy load on the case managers with the various responsibilities, especially what it was like in the spring. Is there anything being done to help support case managers in the fall?
We recognize the multiple hats that our special education teachers provide and all of our special education staff provide, with the not only being direct service providers like instructors, but also being case managers. We have worked through our special education reopening committees to ensure that we've had representatives from our related service staff and our teaching staff to give flexibility where we can to the greatest extent possible in terms of timelines, and also ensuring that any documents and guidance documents, we put it in as user-friendly format as we can. We are still working through many of these procedures. So please do not hesitate to reach out to me or any of the other hosts, that if you have recommendations or ways that we can help strengthen our processes and procedures and really help bring relief to our staff, we are open to that feedback. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We also recognize that the unique caseloads are probably different at each level. So if you are looking at your unique caseload or schedule load, please don't hesitate to reach out to your director as well, so that we could help walk alongside you and problem solve.
You started to touch on this a little bit. What special education services will be delivered in the virtual academy?
We are still bound by FAPE. So the At the start of the fall, and so these are procedures that are still under development by the reopening committee. So I'm going to say this, I'm being very transparent that I'm recognizing that I am talking very vaguely. Updates to the IELP will need to occur again in the fall. Do I know what that's going to look like? Nope. Do I know what the form's going to look like? Nope. Do I know what the timeline's going to look like? Nope. But we welcome your feedback. So all of that is going to need to be done. And so the IELP will provide the blueprint for how services need to look in that virtual academy. So students will still need to receive all of their special education services, whether it's reading interventions, speech services, occupational services. And the way that we've been answering that question for parents has been a student's IELP will guide how services will look, and it will be a balance, and it will be delivered by both synchronous and asynchronous service delivery, which is very much how it was delivered in the spring. And so that document will decide how those are delivered. We do have reopening committees that are working through the feedback from our parent surveys, as well as their expertise from being practitioners in the field to give best practice guidelines as to how those services could look, whether it's intervention delivery or related service delivery. So the reopening committees will have some guidance based upon program as to how services look from a best practice standpoint in a virtual environment.
I think you just answered this, but again, this is not my world. Will there be another IEP adaptation we will complete for hybrid schedule and or virtual academy? You just answered that, correct? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just reading through questions. Will there be a need for teacher assistance within special education on virtual academy?
Yes, there may be. It goes back to what we talked about with the IELP. So as our teams are meeting in the fall to reflect on a student's IEP, we have to reflect on what those services look like, and teaching assistants are services that we need to reflect on. There may be students who need aid support in a virtual environment. There may be students who don't need aid support in a virtual environment, but those are all individual student considerations that our teams are going to need to reflect on once we get back to school and once we have a greater understanding as we work to finalize our reopening plans on what the virtual environments look like.
So this is coming from the high school level. Will Syracuse students attend electives all 4 days they are in attendance? So Erica, with that, can you just offer a clarification about schedules and then address electives?
Yes, so with the recent updates to scheduling, we've also been updating our special education schedules. So early childhood has been updated. So they will attend 4 days a week of in-person instruction. However, their remote day or out day has been shifted from Monday to Wednesday to be congruent with district level services. So we have continuity across the district. Students will be in person for services at the early childhood level in person on services Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Students will not receive remote learning instruction on that Wednesday. It will be an out instructional day for students. At the elementary level, students will attend 5 days a week, but Wednesday will be an early dismissal day for students. Our instructional students will follow that early dismissal schedule. At the middle school level, students are following a hybrid schedule, and our resource and our direct And our supportive directive levels programming students will follow the hybrid schedule, and students will receive in-person instruction depending on their A/B days, 2 days a week, and they will receive remote instruction in a synchronous and asynchronous format on Wednesdays. At the middle school level, our instructional Syracuse students will receive 4 days a week of in-person instruction on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Students will receive remote instruction on Wednesdays. High school will follow the same format as middle school with co-taught, direct, supportive, and directive, following the hybrid schedule, and receiving asynchronous and synchronous remote instruction on Wednesdays, and instructional students in our Syracuse program attending Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday with remote instruction on Wednesday. There was another part to the question, Erica.
Electives.
Electives. So we do have our subcommittees looking through various options for what supervision during electives, or in the event that the student mainstreamed or attended a direct level class. What supervision looks like may be very dependent upon that building and what resources they have. But the reopening committee for our essential and SAIL and instructional level programming are working to develop various options that buildings may consider for that supervision. An example of a supervision idea may be that the students are within the instructional classroom and they may be working on their remote instruction, and there is another adult in the room to supervise them while they're working remotely. Nicole or Danielle, do you have anything else to add to what some of the other ideas are? But I do want to clarify that it could be building dependent depending on what the unique needs of each of those buildings.
Nicole, we can't hear you. I know you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Try again.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. It's great to meet so many new faces at such, one time. What Erica said was one of the ideas that our reopening subcommittee is in discussions. We are going to discuss it further tomorrow in our next meeting. But I would also add that, yes, it may be more building specific based on what resources are available and what student schedules look like.
Thank you. B, this next question is for you, and I apologize if you answered this. B, can you just clarify, are you saying that we need to reopen a completed record review reevaluation?
No, I'm not. I'm not saying that, but there are some evals that were put on hold because they couldn't be completed entirely. So those will have to be relooked at and completed. So those parts that were not completed.
What is the procedure if the number of special education caseload changes, i.e. FTE, within a building based on the option of virtual academy? Will a resource teacher be sent to another school, or will one take over the caseload for virtual academy students assigned to that home school?
At this point, our first step is really to work through enrollment, and right now we are waiting on those enrollment numbers.
How will situations be handled where a student typically requires hands-on or physical assistance to complete a task? Will these goal areas be addressed at this time in compliance with CDC recommendations for social distancing for student and staff safety?
We recognize that there's going to be times where staff need to get in contact closer than 6 feet. So staff are encouraged first to try other prompting strategies that allow you to maintain 6 feet social distancing. In the event that you need to become closer than 6 feet social distance in order to prompt or redirect a student or respond to a student's social, emotional needs or behavioral needs, there are guidance documents that discuss how best to, what additional PPE is needed for your safety and the student's safety in order to become closer than 6 feet social distance.
With the limit of 15 minutes of close contact being a guideline, what will that look like for a 45-minute session? Is this going to be addressed from the department or decided on a building basis?
Can that person give more clarity in terms of the 45-minute session?
Sure. I'm going to move on and so we can get to another question. Will community instruction trips be allowed? Will vocational sites within the school be allowed? Will students be allowed to cook?
I'm going to take each one of those as a separate question. So for community-based instruction, we are prioritizing our transition program first. So first, yes, community-based instruction trips will be allowed. However, they may not be allowed in the same manner and capacity or under the same process they were allowed before in the past. All of our students, both general education and special education students, will participate in some form of reintegration assessment process. For students who regularly participate in community-based instruction, their reintegration assessments may very much assess whether or not students are able to follow the models of adults, follow redirections, whether or not they are able to adhere to face mask requirements, social distancing requirements, and other safety measures that are necessary in order for that student to maintain CDC and DuPage County Public Health guidelines as they go out into the community. So those types of factors are all part of our student assessment. But there's also a community-based component that we've worked on with both legal and the DuPage County Health Department. So in much the same way that we are assessing students' readiness for the community, we're assessing community factors and we're looking at positivity rates. And so prior to going out into the community, staff will need to look at what the positivity rates are and whether or not positivity rates are increasing or whether or not they're decreasing. As long as positivity rates are staying status quo or they're decreasing, students will be able to go out into the community. We do have guidelines that are in the process of being developed by legal. So if you are a staff member who takes students out into the community, we will make sure that you have these documents and you receive information about them. We did give this preview to our parents last night, so they are aware that community trips will look different. But we are advising that all community trips for the first few weeks of school are suspended in order to allow those reintegration assessments so that we are aware of a student's readiness to go out into the community. It also allows staff to become familiar with the new processes. And we've also begun to identify some alternatives to community-based instruction. So if we're regularly going out for shopping, we may need to divert some of those trips to online shopping. In regards to in-building vocational jobs, yes, we can do in-building vocational jobs as long as it's compliant with our physical distancing, social distancing, and other district reopening guidelines. I encourage those teams to work with Nicole as to what is your unique business. For example, some businesses may be able to occur, some businesses may not. I am cautioning against any sort of food business because right now our reopening guidelines are it should be individual and prepackaged foods. So if you own a cafe or a coffee cart, that is a business that we might need to transition to some sort of other vocational endeavor. There was one other question, Erica.
Cooking, did you get to that one?
In terms of cooking, cooking is allowed as long as it is an individual cooking activity. So instead of making whole class meals, students would need to make an individual student meal, and students cannot share cooking materials. So in working with our transition and reopening committee, we have discussed that students should have their own cooking utensils. So depending on the level, there might be different levels of developmental cooking. So it might be for some of our younger students, they're working on no bake or no stovetop, no oven. It might be at middle school, they're working on microwave or just stovetop. High school and transition will look differently. Please work with Nicole on that. But students should have their own cooking utensils. So students should not share their microwave bowl. They should not share their cooking utensils. They should have their own individual materials.
If staff who feel unsafe to work with a student who is exempt from a mask, what should they do?
Please contact your building administrator and your director.
Students who are that rare exception who do not have to wear a mask in those extreme cases, will families of that classroom be notified?
Due to confidentiality, there will not be an individual student notification. However, it is part of our global notice that as part of our board policy, we are a district, that there are rare exceptions. Through the IEP process, any student who has an exception to a face mask would be included. So if you're a staff member and that student has a face mask exemption, that will be added to the student's IEP, and you as a staff member would be notified when you are educationally working with that student.
If I am teaching in the virtual academy, will I have access to my building, and supplies in my building? Also, would we be able to do a home visit if parents agree to it? For example, outside reading a book or just introducing ourselves to our new classmates?
I'm going to write those questions down in terms of access to your building. I have not been working with our human resources and our access to buildings reopening committee, but I will make note of that those are great questions.
When will special education staff be notified if students with IEPs have been enrolled in virtual academy versus in-person learning? Are those students still on our caseloads for this year? So we are asking families to complete the registration process by this Friday. We do know that a number of families won't respond, and then we're going to have to do a little bit of reach out. So we would anticipate having some of those numbers next week, and we'll communicate with staff as quickly as we are able. Do we have the okay to wear scrubs?
I'm not aware of any policy that indicates that staff cannot wear scrubs. I did identify that it is the programs that will have regular and direct contact with bodily fluids that special education will be providing scrubs for. All of our buildings will have disposable gowns for staff to be able to put over their clothing in the event that they need to respond to any type of crisis situation, or in the event that they need to come in close direct contact with students, whether it is to respond to a behavioral event, feeding, lifting. And so we are already in the process of purchasing multiple boxes of disposable gowns that staff can put right over their clothing and then take off after that event is done.
With students only being in the building 2 days a week, teachers and support staff will be holding on tightly to any face-to-face access to students that they can get. Will related services such as social work need to meet IEP minutes virtually, or will those be able to be done in person?
Can you repeat that question?
Basically, the question is, when students are in the building, teachers and staff are going to want to have every single ounce of minute with those kids. For related services like social work, will those need to be minutes be met virtually or in person?
Can I say something about that at the secondary level?
Yeah.
I would say that it's going to have to be collaborative. I understand everybody's going to be pulling for kids' times. So, you know, at least at the secondary level, we have times that might be able to access students without interfering with academic times, like, for example, access or possibly using some of the academic skills time if a student's in it. I think it's going to be no different than if we didn't want the kids leaving, for example, math class to go to social work. I think that would need to be addressed based on the student and what free times everybody agrees that they can be pulled with the least amount of academic loss.
Thank you. We have a couple of minutes left and there are a lot of questions still in the chat bar. So again, I am going to get a transcript of that to Cameron and B so that they can follow up with any questions that didn't get addressed here. But what I do want to do is, because I know Erica, Ekstrom, Danielle, Camer, B, you guys have seen a lot of those frequently asked questions from staff. Are there any of those FAQs that did not get asked in the chat bar that you are seeing a lot that you'd like to make sure gets covered today? I'll let you go first, Camer.
I think a lot of our questions have been around PPE, and I think Erica answered that with what we have ordered, and also about the staffing needs and the time with students. So I do feel like those have been answered to the best of our abilities at the moment, knowing that it is, as I keep saying, nailing Jell-O to a wall. So it will shift and it will change a little bit, but we are very cognizant of the concerns that people have in terms of their time with students, time with case management, time with, you know, so, but I do think that that's been the majority of the questions have been revolving around PPE and I think just case management and time allotment with students. So I think we answered that as best we could.
B, anything else that on your end that you wanted to make sure we covered today that has not already been covered?
No, I don't think so. Just we're still working hard and we're trying our best to solidify details. And there's just a lot of things that are still, you know, we haven't figured out for sure, but we're trying our best. So we'll get those answers to you as soon as we can.
Thank you. Danielle?
I think we touched base on a lot of it. It was just a lot of, for those students that require the hand-over-hand assistance, how are we preparing for that? And we touched base on that, and the more we finalize within our committees, we'll get that information out to the staff as quickly as possible.
Thank you. And then Mary, Nicole, Stephanie, Erica, anything that you hoped that we'd cover today that we didn't?
I just want to make sure that from the bottom of my heart, I thank all of our teachers, our paraprofessionals or related service staff for all of your hard work. Our staff in District 200 is absolutely amazing. And so I thank all of you for going on this journey with us. And so thank you for spending an afternoon with us and asking us these questions. And so we are working to get information to you as quickly as possible, and we welcome your feedback. We recognize that we couldn't get to all your questions, but please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And just thank you for your time, and thank you for all that you do for your students, your families, and each other every day. So please enjoy these final weeks of summer, and it was great to see all of you, even if it was just in little 2x2 squares.
Thank you.